Good morning, everyone. I welcome you all once again uh, for our ACTREX Saturday academic program. Our today's presenter is Dr. SAYAK Choudhary. He is assistant professor in Department of Nuclear Medicine, Tata Memorial Hospital, Mumbai. He is covering the topic for today is role of PET-CT for larynx and hypopharyngeal cancers. So I welcome you, Dr. Saib.
Thank you, ma'am. Good morning, everybody. So I'll start sharing my screen now. Right. So it is visible, right? The screen.
Yes, it is visible.
Thank you. So good morning, everybody, and thank you for inviting me back to this lecture series. So we'll just start. So this is a very short lecture because most of the PET-CT related things for head and neck cancers I had covered in my last lecture. So this will be just a breeze through that how laryngeal and hypopharyngeal cancers look in PET-CT and how they commonly spread, and that common spread pattern that we see in our cancers. And a few elaboration will be made on cartilage erosion, and some representative images will also be shown. And post-treatment changes, I will not go in much detail, but because in the last session it was discussed in great detail. But I will show some images that I didn't show at that time pertaining to today's topic. And also I have prepared a very short slide on SUV because I remember last time someone asked me about what is SUV and what is its role in reporting and all these things. So just a short slide I have made to cover that. Okay, so with that we can begin. So just a basic refresher on the subsides of larynx, supraglottis, glottis, subglottis that we already know. So I'll not go into any more details in this. So our imaging perspective, stage from local disease T3 to T4 is important because mucosal diseases of T1, T2 can easily be mapped via larynx. Can easily be mapped via local examination through laryngoscope. But when there is submucosal spread, then imaging comes into play to see how much the depth of invasion of the tumor is. So T3, as we all know, mostly extending into the paraglottic spaces, and T4A infiltrating the cartilages, and T4B extensive involvement of mediastinum, prevertebral fascia, and also encasement of carotid, that is 270 degrees contact. And end staging also we all know, depending on the size, and the new addition that has been done in a recent thing, that is extranodal spread should be commented on in imaging reports, that is perinodal. So initial staging, we all know that mucosal spread is evaluated by local examination, and submucosal invasion, for that we have CCT or MRI. Nodal stage, we have CCT, USG, and FNSC. USG and FNSC is the most preferred method. PET-CCT and MRI. PET-CCT has the highest sensitivity, much higher sensitivity in picking up nodal mets as compared to MRI and CCT, but it has a lower specificity, especially in Indian population. And for end staging, CCT and PET-CCT. What does NCCN say? NCCN say to do to reserve PET scan for during initial staging only for T4A and B patients, or where clinical suspicions of distal metastasis is high, and also in post-treatment settings. So now we'll just go through the common modes of spread. So supraglottic cancers, three main subtypes of supraglottic that we can see. The one is epiglottis. From epiglottis, we easily know that it can go into pre-epiglottic space anteriorly, and laterally it can go into the paraglottic spaces. From the pre-epiglottic spaces, it can go into vallicular, base of tongue, all these places. Or also it can go lower down into glottis or subglottis. Then false cord, most false cord tumors spread laterally into the paraglottic space, and they may erode the thyroid cartilage uh, to show exolaryngeal spreads, and transglottic spread into glottis and subglottis is also seen. And from epiglottic cord, they can go.
Dr. Sayak, sorry for the interruption. One request, if you could go a bit slow, because our
Okay.
most of the resident joining, many of them will be surgical oncologists or
Okay.
even other groups who may not be able to comprehend so early with these subsites. So I would
Okay.
request if we can go a bit slow. Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay. Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. I'll go slow. Um, so I'll just hold this slide, and I will just go to this slide. Then we'll come back to the other slide again. So here, this is just some basic anatomy structures that how we perceive it in cross-sectional imaging, CT scan. These images are all taken from this article. So so first things that we should know, this is the epiglottis, obviously. So epiglottis, and in front this fat space, black fat space that we are seeing, that is the pre-epiglottis space. This is a very important involvement of this space we have to see, and it is very important in terms of planning therapy. So this is best seen in the sagittal side. This is also the pre-epiglottis space on the axial side. Then there is the fossa, that is connecting here the epiglottis very nicely. This is the piriform fossa, lateral wall, posterior boundaries, and anteriorly this fat space is your paraglottic space, and this fold, mucosal fold, is your false cord. Here also you can see paraglottic space and false cord. This is the arytenoids. So we all know vocal cord attaches. We all know the vocal cord attaches to the vocal processes of arytenoids. So above the vocal processes is your uh, ventricle of larynx. So that basically spans. So how in imaging we see the span of the ventricle via the height of the arytenoids. So it basically spans the height of the ventricle, and from the ventricle 1 centimeter up to 1 centimeter below is your glottis that covers your true cords, that has the true cords. And so this is the true cords you are seeing. You can see the body of the arytenoid, and basically the plico-arytenoid joint. This is the uh, uh, vocal process of the arytenoid. So most of these cartilages will ossify, but this vocal process of the arytenoids will not ossify because they are not hyaline cartilages. And so these are the very basic structures that you need to know to go to the PET-CT images. So coming back from this, so epiglottis. So epiglottis from epiglottis. So this is epiglottis. So from you can easily see the front structure is the pre-epiglottic space. So most of the epiglottic. Hello. Yes, someone is talking. So most of the epiglottic space will arise from the center. So they will uh, go in front and infiltrate this pre-epiglottic space, or from pre-epiglottic space it can go into what is in front of that is vallicula, uh, or through glossoepiglottic fold. This fold, it can go into base of tongue. This is base of tongue. Or it from epiglottis it can spread laterally to the paraglottic spaces. See this black fat filled spaces, it can spread. Or after, or it can go down to the anterior commissure, and spread to uh, glottis, because here you can see the petiole of the epiglottis is very near to the thyroid cartilage. So from here, through the thyroepiglottic ligament, it can go and spread into the glottis. Now, coming to false cords. So these are the false cords. So you can easily see that there laterally there is a fat space, that is the paraglottic space. So obviously it will go there. It can then erode the thyroid cartilage, and it can go in, show exolaryngeal spread. So that will be T4A disease. Or it can go down into the anterior commissure, and it can go into the glottis. Or it can go in front, and it can actually involve the pre-epiglottic space and ariepiglottic fold. These are ariepiglottic folds. So these are all along the medial sides of the pyriform fossa. So posteriorly, any lesion arising from this, if it spreads posteriorly, it will involve the pyriform fossa. But if it is spreads anteriorly, then it will involve the paraglottic spaces along the false cords. So this also can laterally, it can abut and then erode the thyroid cartilage and show exolaryngeal spread. So one thing is we should remember that this paraglottic space and the pre-epiglottic space are connected to each other. So any tumor that is involved in invading the paraglottic space can easily infiltrate the pre-epiglottic space as well. So any question? Okay. So here this one image I am showing. I'll show PET-CT scans also. So this is probable epicenter is the AE fold, and from this AE fold you can easily see the soft tissue density tumor has spread into the paraglottic space. Compared it to the opposite side where this area is completely dark. That means this is fat density. Darkness fat density, and this here you can see soft tissue density. So it has gone into the paraglottic space. Not only paraglottic space, it has gone into the ariepiglottic space also. This is the anterior area is pre-epiglottic space also. So anterior area is the pre-epiglottic space, and it has also shown cartilage erosion. You can see here, and also it has shows extra exolaryngeal spread. You can see the soft tissue here is much more as compared to the soft tissue this side. So obviously there is exolaryngeal spread, and it has also involved the pyriform sinus as well. You can see how the pyriform sinus cavity has narrowed as compared to the contralateral side. So when we see, this is how we see scans, and this is another scan. This is a bit much. So the previous disease was clearly T4A disease, but it is not a T4B disease because from this section at least you can see the carotids are free, the fat base is maintained, and most likely the pre-epiglottic, prevertebral fascia is also free. So when we call something T4B, we have to see if the carotid spaces are carotid spaces are involved or not. So that means 270-degree encasement of the carotid, or if the prevertebral fascia is involved or not. Now the problem with prevertebral fascia evaluation is CT scan doesn't have a very good soft tissue discrimination, and this is just a fascia line space. So determining the prevertebral fascia sometimes may be difficult. But here, if the prevertebral fascia is not infiltrated, basically the tumor hasn't gone into the prevertebral space, then you will see this kind of a black marking that goes like this. Because behind the prevertebral fascia, there are the longus colli muscles, that is the prevertebral muscles on both sides. So they form a kind of wing type thing. So here this black thing will go, black line will get completely obliterated. Obviously CT has a poor sensitivity and specificity for determining prevertebral fascia involvement. Sometimes PET helps, but PET also has that partial volume effect. So that also sometimes creates problem in determining the status of the prevertebral fascia and prevertebral space. But when during reporting, if we see this fat space is completely obliterated, then we might even report it like the fat space with prevertebral muscle, that is longus colli muscles, is obliterated from the mass. So that would raise the suspicion that there is a possibility that prevertebral space might have been infiltrated. So here another lesion. So this is a much smaller lesion as compared to the previous, but this also has the epicenter in AE fold. This is a PET. This is that your CT, and this is the PET CT fusion images. So here also you can see a little bit of extension into the paraglottic space is there. So this is a T3 disease. So here this is a very big disease that is infiltrating, that is basically occluding the almost entire supraglottic lumen. So you can see they had to put a tracheostomy tube also to relieve the obstruction. And there is gross thyroid cartilage erosion and extra exolaryngeal spread. However, in this patient also, we probably the prevertebral space is not infiltrated. Here you can see this fascial lining. Here also you can trace it, sort of. But this is a very extensive tumor. This has extended into the cricoid region. So this is the cricoid, and probably into the upper cervical esophagus as well. So this is the cricoid, right? So this is the post-cricoid region. Post-cricoid region is a part of hypopharynx. So we'll come to hypopharynx after some time. So it has infiltrated much, and also, but here the tumor is likely abutting the carotid. However, the abutment is less than 270 degrees. And this sorry, the not abutment, the angle of contact is less than 270 degrees. But if you combine this node and the lesion, then it is almost 180 degrees angle of contact. So there is a node much uptake because it's pretty necrotic. Here you can see high density inside the node. So this is very typical of squamous cell carcinoma, where the nodes will be necrotic with cystic densities or hypodensities inside. So now glottic CA. So from glottic, so much of the glottic carcinomas are the most common of the laryngeal carcinoma. Almost 65% of the laryngeal carcinomas are glottic carcinomas, whereas supraglottic carcinomas are 25 to 30%. You could say. So most of the glottic cancers do originate from the anterior part of the vocal folds, and they can immediately go to the anterior commissure. So anterior commissure thickness, by seeing the anterior commissure thickness, you can, in a CT scan, you can easily say that if the anterior commissure is involved or not. So if it is, the thickness is more than 1 centimeter, then you can say okay, this is involved. But we have a PET, so obviously PET also helps. If the PET has uptake in anterior commissure, then so another thing I'd like to express here, PET normally can show uptake in vocal cord. Vocal cords, because if the uptake period, especially if the uptake period is the patient is talking, so physiological uptake can happen in the vocal cord. But most often the uptake will be localized in the joint, that is cricoarytenoid joints, and rest of the cord might not show uptake, and especially anterior commissure will not show uptake. So uptake in anterior commissure in PET is a sign of involvement. So from this anterior commissure, the tumor can then spread to contralateral cord. From this anterior commissure only, the tumor can go into supraglottis, or it can even go into infraglottis. Or if the tumor is a bit posteriorly placed, then it can involve the posterior commissure. This is the posterior commissure. That's the mucosal fold that is covering the inner lining of your inner surface of your cricoid ring. And it can, from there, it can involve the arytenoid, it can involve the cricoarytenoid joint, or it can infiltrate the cricoid cartilage itself. So these are the possible spread of glottic CA. So one thing we should remember that since the glottic region is not very lymphatic rich, lymph node metastasis from purely glottic CA that has not spread to other parts is rare. And the fix, if cord fixation, you have to do, to understand cord fixation, you have to do clinical examination of intraretinoids, and cricoretinoid joint involvement is a imaging surrogate for cord fixation. And I would like to point out another thing also that we see sometimes is in FDG, contralaterally increased uptake in the other vocal cord. So if this joint, cricoretinoid joint is involved and this cord is not able to move, and but the other cord is able to move, so it will compensate more, and that cord will actually show more uptake as compared to this cord. And so that is also one of the surrogates that we sometimes use, but it is not very specific or sensitive. So this is one cancer. So here you can see in the primary epicenter, probably also on the left side, that is involved the commissure, then is going into the right side. There is no cartilage erosion. Obvious cartilage erosion is not there. You can see a little bit of fat plane here is still maintained. Then there is another cancer. Here you can see from the glottic cancer, it has gone into the supraglottic region, from the glottic into the supraglottic region. So this is a T4B cancer. So the slice is not taken at the level of the glottis. This slice is taken at level of much lower level. So, but it is infiltrating everything. You see, surrounding strap muscles, thyroid, even if the and also it is encasing. So here the PET up. These are fused images. This color grading is a different color grading that we usually see in you must be seeing in your centricity. So this is rainbow color grading. This is sharper. This gives a more sharper contrast. So it is encasing. You can see it is encasing this carotid vessels 270 degrees. So it is a T4B tumor. Now, subglottis is the rarest of all the glottic, all the laryngeal subtypes. It can spread into, and since this presents late, since the patients are usually not symptomatic earlier, so usually when they present with gross infiltration of surrounding areas. So that means it might show tracheal erosion, cricoid cartilage erosion, or extension into glottis. So here one is there, probable epicenter in the subglottis. So you can see the cricoid is eroded, exolaryngeal spread, thyroid is also eroded. So now hypopharyngeal SCC. So hypopharynx has 3 subsites: pyriform sinus, posterior hypopharyngeal wall, and post-cricoid region. So let us go back to this thing. This is your pyriform sinuses, lateral wall. This is the whole thing. This is the posterior hypopharyngeal wall, or for the posterior pharyngeal wall. Starts from the level of hyoid, ends at the level of cricoid. And after below this, at the level of the cricoid arch, posterior to this is your post-cricoid region that is continuous inferiorly with the cervical esophagus. So basically, hypopharynx is the upper part of the pharyngeal area that is continuous with the cervical esophagus. So any tumor in the hypopharynx, especially involving post-cricoid region, can easily go into cervical esophagus. So pyriform sinus, it can spread anteriorly to paraglottic spaces, and laterally it can extend into neck tissue by eroding the thyroid cartilage, as we have seen in this image here. From here, it can easily spread here. It can anteriorly, it can go into the paraglottic spaces. Okay, and if it's a posterior pharyngeal wall tumor, so it can easily spread into retropharyngeal space, and even behind retropharyngeal space also it can go, that is prevertebral space. And so this hypopharynx is a pretty lymphatic rich area. So these tumors may actually present with lymph nodes. So this carcinoma of unknown primary patients who present with neck nodes, most common sites that we find are either hypopharynx or nasopharynx. So from that it can spread, and then from post-cricoid region it can easily spread into cervical esophagus. But has the worst prognosis of the bunch. Okay. So now this is the staging. So this is not much different. We are more interested about T3 to T4 stages. So now let's see some images. So here you can see enhancing thickening, circumferential thickening involving all the walls of the pyriform sinus, but it is not involving any other subsites. You can argue that there is minimal extension in the paraglottic space also. However, there are bulky nodes there. In the these nodes are actually conglomerating, and the combined dimension could be 6 centimeter almost, and they are showing gross extranodal extension. So you can see these nodes boundaries are pretty fuzzy in 3 diseases. So boundaries are pretty fuzzy. So another scan probable epicenter is post-cricoid region, and anteriorly it is going and infiltrating the cricoid cartilage. You can see the cartilage is discontinuous here. Okay, we will come to cartilage erosion in a while. So this is another scan. So this is a section in the cervical originate wall only. So here you can see a lateral node and also a upper retropharyngeal node. This is a retropharyngeal node. So might have been posterior pharyngeal wall involved, because that is one of the draining sites for posterior pharyngeal wall. So now cartilage erosion. So one thing about larynx that we have to report and have to be very about is evaluating for cartilage immediately, because that some of that we will, especially if the cartilages are non-ossified. If the cartilages are ossified, so if this hyaline cartilage, so this is also non-ossified almost, but if this hyaline cartilage is ossified, hello, yes, any question? Hello.
I think Dr. SAYAK, there's some disturbance. Somebody is this microphone. I think
Okay.
yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. So this cartilage is not ossified. So when it ossifies, both the cortexes, outer and inner cortices, and the medulla gets filled with fats. So there is a decent contrast, and you can actually comment on much more confidently if there is any erosion. But problem happens when there is no significant sclerosis. Sorry, no significant ossification, and this is unossified. Then it becomes problematic, especially evaluating it with the CT scan. So what are the CT scan criteria? So sclerosis, if the cartilage is diffusely sclerosed asymmetrically as compared to the opposite side, there is a possibility that there is extension, or it is erode, or you can see an obvious erosion or lysis of the cartilage, or if there is gross presence of extralaryngeal tumor. So now coming to sclerosis. So sclerosis has a high sensitivity for intracartilaginous disease, but you can easily understand that it is not very specific, because inhomogeneous ossification can also appear as sclerosis, especially for thyroid cartilage, for which it has the lowest specificity. But for cricoid and arytenoid cartilages, this feature performs fairly well. Erosion or lysis of extralaryngeal tumors, that is a highly specific criteria. So if there is erosion, then you can more or less say that this cartilage is eroded, but it is not very sensitive. Why? Because erosion doesn't happen in the initial phases. So initial phases, it might not erode, so you might miss it. So it is not very sensitive. Another problem with sclerosis is oftentimes this kind of tumors have peritumoral inflammatory processes. That inflammatory processes can itself give rise to reactive sclerosis in the cartilage. So that also decreases the specificity of this sclerotic. But if we combine all of these criteria, CT has a decent overall sensitivity and a good negative predictive value. MRI obviously has a higher sensitivity than CT, almost 95%. However, sometimes MRI may not be as specific as CT. And there are other techniques that have been used in various places, and there have been studies that have been published, like CT radiomics characteristics have been used in places that to better predict cartilage involvement, and also something called a dual energy CT and an iodine overlay mapping. So we basically you do take CT in two different energy kilovolt points. So one you take say 120 or 100, and one another you take for 140. Then from those two images you can generate different plots. One of them is like an iodine overlay plot, where you can basically suppress the calcification, and only the areas of contrast, that is the iodine containing contrast, will show. So this is practice in Tata. So, and that is not very common, because I have also not seen these things in Tata, but these papers have been published. So let us see some images. So here we can see there is erosion of the internal cortex. Sorry, internal cortex of the thyroid cartilage. So this is clearly eroding. Or here you can see gross erosion of the whole full thickness of this lamina of thyroid cartilage and exolaryngeal spread as well. So this kind of it is seen. So these are pretty obvious, but many times it is very dubious, and we are really not sure it is. So here it is one like sclerosis has happened uniformly, and also you can see that there is exolaryngeal spread because there is the soft tissue is thickened as compared to the right. I myself personally am very wary of sclerosis, just seeing sclerosis and calling it cartilage erosion uh, without any other features. So now nodal metastasis. So nodal metastasis, I believe there was already a class, and we had also discussed in our last session. So size criteria should follow, or it can have a central necrosis, loss of fatty hilum, perinodal extension, and FDG avidity. So these are the features of nodal metastasis. The size criteria is given here: 1.5 on greatest dimension for level 1 and 2, 0.8 in patent dimension for retropharyngeal nodes, and 1 for any other places. So here supraglottic carcinomas usually present with nodal metastasis. They show nodal metastasis, and reporting nodal metastasis is very important because it significantly affects the prognosis. and mostly level 1, 2 and 3 nodes are involved. Glottic is usually absent. Subglottic area is also not very lymphatic rich. However, they may metastasize to pretracheal and paratracheal nodes, often in even in the superior mediastinum also. So we should look superior mediastinum very closely in subglottic extension of tumors. And from TFS also 2, 3, and if the posterior pharyngeal wall is involved, then retropharyngeal spaces has to be helps in there the soft tissue quantity is not that pharyngeal nodes might be missed, but PET always shows uptake and picks them up. Distant metastasis incidence in at initial diagnosis is pretty low. Depending on the stage, it can be 5 to 15%. Most common site is lung and FDG. So various studies have shown FDG PET 4 to 17% of cases. But in our data in Tata Hospital is in our internal data, the presence of extra thoracic metastasis in head and neck cancer initial staging is extremely low. So basically, what I mean to say that in most cases, CT thorax might suffice. And laryngeal cancer is also pretty scarce. So here's few examples. So these are the examples that I am showing are very grossly metastatic. So this patient was also like also had a TAP, I guess, and then they sent for a PET for better assessment of distant metastasis. So you can see grossly metastatic bone, mediastinal nodes, and liver lesions, hypodense liver lesions, and all these things. So now we'll just go through few scans of how post-therapy scans look in this area. I'll not go through the post-therapy criteria today because we had already discussed those before in the previous lecture. So I'll just go through patterns of uptake we see in post-therapy cases, because the role of it really comes in post-therapy and recurrent setting. So here was a hypopharyngeal cancer after RT. So you can see there is this diffuse uptake persisting. So this is normal. This is normal post-RT inflammation. And you can see the soft tissue that was there has gone away. You can see the fat spaces that was not seen beforehand has gone away. And also this node that was seen before here, this node, big node, that has completely gone. So this is a good response. So I might give it as a NIRADS 2 just because there is some local, for all practical purposes, that's one. NIRADS is a response assessment system that we are doing. So here, so we had discussed what will be the NIRADS score for this patient. So upper can someone volunteer? Okay, so basically this is completely gone. Whatever little bit residual uptake you are seeing here is post-RT inflammation. And the node has also gone significantly in size. Whatever residual uptake is there, it is not very specific. We'll give it as neck NIRADS to neck and ask for a follow-up scan. However, this is a very non-specific uptake, and for this we should remember that this low-grade uptakes are very low positive predictive value for predicting residual disease. So many of these might show uptake for a long time, but it will not progress. Some residual disease. In the you can see the focal uptake and all is still persisting, but most likely uh, you can actually still see nodes you can still see, you can see this necrotic node, but uptake is complexly gone. So this is a recurrent supraglottic cancer with liver and bone. So now this few conditions that I want to show that pertaining especially to larynx and RT. So this is a relatively rare, but in Tata we see it. This is chondronecrosis, but it sometimes can mimic local recurrence. Is pretty normal, now pretty specific. So here you can see the uptake is along the whole length of this thyroid lamina, but the uptake is mainly concentrated on the surrounding soft tissue areas, not in the stem of the lamina, the substance of the lamina, where you can see there is a photopenia. Also, you can see areas of air pockets, and that have not only in surrounding areas infiltrated this lamina. So that means it is completely necrotic, being destroyed by the post-RT inflammatory process. So this uptakes, uptakes can be very high, like 20 can be there, but these are not. This is not a recurrent disease. This is a thing. This is another. This is a bit less obvious. This is a focal one, not involving the whole lamina, but it is still a chondronecrosis. Here you can see a focal area of photopenia and surrounding area of increased uptake, and also you can see that this area cartilage is kind of destroyed, and there is this small tiny air pockets. So this is one other scan that I wanted to show you. This is not the correct scan. I actually couldn't get the correct scan from PACS. So this patient was a buccal mucosa cancer. They gave RT. After 4 months, patient presented with severe laryngeal edema, and they had to put a tracheostomy. After, so they sent for a scan to see if there is any local, any second primary in the larynx. So in that scan, the scan that came before this scan, so there was intense uptake. The uptake was some 15 something, and there was like a diffuse edematous soft tissue completely occluding the laryngeal lumen. So that is one other thing. That is one other presentation that we see laryngeal edema that is completely obstructing the larynx, and the uptake will be pretty high. But one way we can say that this is not a second primary but a laryngeal edema, because the soft there, the HU is a bit lower is on the lower side, and it will be look bit watery. It will not show much of enhancement, or and it will look watery, low HU, low attenuation, less enhancement. But the uptake might be very high, and there will not be any focal area of increased uptake, but the uptake will be very diffusely intense, and of fibrosis and post-RT changes will be there in that muscles and all. So in this patient, there is another. So after that, the patient, they did a biopsy also of this patient, and that came negative, and post-RT necrosis it came. So after that, they sent back the patient. Then the patient again came after 2 more months. So this is that scan. So here you can, so Avi, now the patient's presenting complaint is partial bilateral upper and lower limb paralysis. So they send us to see if there is any bone met along the spine. So here you can see this laryngeal edema is still there, uptake is still there, inflammation is going on, but it has decreased. If you had seen the previous scan, you would have understood that the uptake is decreased, but it is still there. But here's something else we can see. We can see intense uptake in the spinal cord along the RT field. So this area, the marrow is completely dead. So you can see an area of photopenia, and posterior to it in the spinal canal, you can see increased uptake. So we said that this is very rare. This is a post-RT induced myelopathy. So that it is not doesn't happen often, very rare. And they did a MRI. So MRI showed like gross cord edema with settings involving in T2 images involving the whole cervicodorsal spine, and also increased contrast enhancement, T1 contrast enhancement along this area where the uptake is seen. And it was other causes of this long segment myelitis were ruled out, and ultimately patient improved on DEXA. So this is my point was not this, but this is one thing that we see. So now see this image and now see this other image. So this patient also was a buccal mucosa patient treated initially, then presented with stridor. They did a stridor, and we did a scan. Here we can find soft tissue occluding the larynx with intense FDG uptake. So here, what it is it recurrence or is it laryngeal edema? Can someone volunteer? Okay, so this is a recurrence. So here you can see, so probable site of origin is the posterior pharyngeal wall. Uh, so here you can see the soft tissue is not watery or low attenuation. It is same as that muscle and other soft tissue that you are seeing, and it is showing some areas of heterogeneity. Basically, I will not call it enhancement, and the uptake is also pretty intense. And you can see here as a node. So this node would have been missed completely in CT because there is no demarcation, but in fact it is pictured. This is the retropharyngeal node. So now the last portion of my topic. So in my last lecture, somebody had asked me about what is SUV, what you reports in what is SUV. So I'll just very briefly mention what it is and how it may pertain to head and neck cancers. Just a small discussion. Okay. So SUV is standardized uptake value. So it basically gives you a number that denotes how much of the injected activity, that is FDG, radioactive element that you have injected in the body, that has concentrated into a particular area. That might be a lesion where you have drawn a region of interest that you have selected. So this is given by this general formula, where R is the amount of activity determined by the PET scan per ml for per ml of blood that you have drawn, and D is activity that you have injected, and Q is the concentration. So if you have 100 kilobecquerel cancer weight, so basically the comes as and this weight you can either have a whole body or you can have a lean body. So from this formula, you can basically see that what all things that can affect SUV and why it may not be a very good or sensitive marker for certain things. So here you can see that the weight goes on top. So it becomes uh, a numerator, and the injected activity is a denominator. So and this R is the where you initial act. So as if you draw a more size of the area, so the SUV will increase. If the patient's weight is more, SUV will be more because weight is a numerator. And if you give less activity to the patient, say if you don't have much activity, you have given 4 millicurie where you should have given 6 millicurie. So then also the SUV will be very high because this is the denominator. So the value increases, right? So, and also SUV is dependent on your blood glucose levels, at what time you are injecting. So there are a lot of parameters that affect SUV. So does SUV have any role in head and neck cancer? There have been studies which have shown some prognostic roles. I'll just briefly mention these. The SUV cutoff of 9 have been seen in few studies. There are other cutoffs also have been put of other metabolic parameters like tumor, total lesion glycolysis, metabolic tumor value, but that is not very important. SUV max, this 9 cutoff has been seen in few different studies. So less than 9 SUV max of the primary lesion uh, shows better local relapse-free survival and disease-free survival. And can SUV cutoff be used for nodal metastasis detection? This question I get asked frequently. So people have used certain cutoffs. So greater than 5 SUV max of node metastasis, less than 3 benign, 3 to 5 equivocal. 70% cases may this accuracy of this method. So this, but PET has, people say that PET has the problem of detecting smaller nodal nodes less than 7 size. So like that, there is another few group of papers that have been published where they tried to correlate the uptake with the nodal size. So depending on the nodal size, they had given different cutoffs. So if the nodal size is less than 1 centimeter, to 1.9 SUV max, 1 to 1.5 centimeter, 2.5, and more than 1.5 to 3 centimeters. So this also this study also showed accuracy of some 70-80%. So, but these values are not very reliable. You can get some idea based on the SUV, but just you cannot use a single cutoff to arrive at a diagnosis. In diagnosis. So not reliable, as we have discussed. Okay, SUV values vary spectacularly. How you do the scan, what is the patient's condition. So you cannot get a single value that will answer all questions. So with this, I end my presentation and I invite any questions. So these are the two main papers that I consulted, like two articles basically, review articles is available that I have consulted.
Thank you, Dr. Sayak. Excellent presentation. I think by the time the residents will be posting questions, I have a couple of questions.
Yes,
One is, what is the, so as you rightly said that CT scan has a moderate, I think, sensitivity and specificity for per primum cases for the primary lesion as well as for the nodal metastasis in head and neck cancers. However, so I just wanted to ask you, what is the incremental value of PET CT over CT for treatment naive cases or
so
for
the thing
nodal
is that
metastasis?
so okay, ma'am. For your nodal metastasis, so if various studies have shown if CT sensitivity of 60%, is 70 to 80%.
Correct.
And some studies have even shows that PET has a sensitivity of taking nodal mets up to 90% even. So it varies, but it is significantly higher than CT, like in all the studies that have shown. Just a plain CT scan. And we are doing a CECT PET CECT. So, and some of the studies are that I am saying, they even did a non-contrast CT with that PET. Like they compared CECT with a non-contrast PET CT. Still, PET performed better than CECT in picking some of the nodal mets. And they do say that small volume, small nodes might not be picked up in PET. That is true. However, if we have a CECT, that problem doesn't happen because many of the papers that conclude that were done in an era when they used to do mostly CT without contrast in conjunction with PET. So now, because a small necrotic node might not be very avid, but we'll obviously call it a met, right? We'll not call it. But the thing is that, but when you go into distant metastasis, like how many patients from curative, the patient is changed into palliative. So here, the role of PET-CT in initial staging is thoda controversial, in the sense, from our own data, we can say 5 to 10% cases there were upstaging. But this is including all the subsets. So there is a one of our residents is currently writing a paper where done a conventional CT based TNM staging and another PET based TNM staging, and based on how much patients upstaging has happened, that they are analyzing. So they will be looking at not only from curative to palliative, but also increase in RT fields and all other things, and change in surgical extent, and all those things also they will be seen. So that is what we are looking at.
I think this is very similar to the study which we have almost completed, where we have looked on for CT scan. We had just taken out the previous numbers, and we are seeing that how much was the sensitivity and specificity of CCT in detecting cartilage erosion for laryngeal lesions.
Okay.
So I think it's quite similar, but we have not included the PET-CT scan.
So, ma'am, in that study, like you did a normal CCT, you didn't do like any of the other things.
Right, right. We have included only the patient with CCT. So we just want to see what is the and the gold standard is histopathology.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So Dr. SAYAK, one more question, since there are not many questions posted. So I would like to ask, like, how do you calculate the size of the lesion based on PET-CT images? Because I think because of the peritumoral inflammation and edema, there is always chance that overstating the size.
Yes. In that chance, that is always there. But we normally don't. What do you call it? When we draw the sizes, we don't do it in the fused images. We usually use the CT sizes most of the time.
Okay.
This is some other cancers we use the PET sizes, just a lung and all, because but for head and neck we don't do that. We use CT only.
Yeah.
But you are right, peritumoral inflammation and all those things, that also, and also PET has this effect called a partial volume effect, by which if the area of intense uptake is there, then it might show falsely increased uptake in that surrounding area sometimes. But we are trained enough to pick up what is partial volume effect and what is not. So because of all these reasons, we don't normally measure the size in fused images.
Correct. And what would you advise, a MRI or a PET-CT for prevertebral fascia involvement, for doubtful prevertebral fascia?
MRI. If there is a doubt, ma'am, MRI. Because
MRI also overestimates the prevertebral fascia involvement.
But, MRI overestimates, but like in a CCT, there is MRI might overestimate, obviously, but CCT, the soft tissue discrimination is like very bad. Like we can, many times we will not be able to comment on only, unless like there is very, very obvious it is.
So I think what we can, the take home message would be, so for doubtful prevertebral fascia involvement, the MRI is the imaging of choice.
Imaging of choice.
Correct. And for our regular per primum on treatment naive cases, CCT of head and of larynx along with thorax is sufficient. However, in cases of recurrent cases, a PET-CT will have incremental value. Is that
yes. Like if initial cases, if you know there is a like possibility of metastasis is there or something, like physical examination, patient is complaining of bone pain and all these things, then obviously you can go ahead with the PET scan.
Yeah, so in cases where we have large volume disease or we have multiple neck nodes, lower neck nodes like level 4 and level 5, and the node is a N3A or N3B node.
And also if there is perinodal extension and all these things, that is also high chance of distant metastasis.
Correct.
And ma'am, I would like to just point out one small thing in terms of post-therapy things. So the criteria that we are following now is NIRADS more or less, but in Indian setting, I would like to just say that it has very low positive predictive value. So lot of the uptake that we see can be very non-specific uptake. Sometimes we may depending on the patient's clinical picture and overall thing, sometimes even if the uptake is much higher, so if it is NIRAD 3 and if there is a focal uptake, so obviously we have to do a FNA. That is what guidelines say. But it is my personal opinion, if the clinical feature suffices and all these things, we can just observe the patient for 2 months and do another scan and see, because I think we recently we have seen certain scans also that you would agree that PET was false positive and all.
Yes, Dr. Sayak, I completely agree with you that a strong clinical correlation with the radiological finding is a must in our day-to-day practice of evaluating and managing the patient. So imaging alone or clinical examination alone cannot be used. Their strong correlation between the two will be useful. So with this, I thank you, Dr. Sayak, for an excellent class on PET-CT, and we would be needing you in our future also for our Saturday ACTRAC academic classes.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a nice weekend. Request.